So hi everyone, my name is Avi Sambira. I'm a director at Signia. I'm based here in Toronto. Before we dive into this entire presentation, a little something for people who doesn't know Signia. So Signia is a cybersecurity firm established in 2015. We provide services globally, focusing on incident response, professional services, and MDR. We are world-renowned, specifically in our crypto space in incident response. You may have heard of our name during the FTX and the Bybit incidents. Those are the public ones that our name was published. But other than that, feel free to read on our website at signia.ca more if you're interested to know about us. So the case that we're going to share today is an incident that we responded to that involves the FBI, North Korea, threat actors, a enterprise in the US that was basically attacked or was part of this entire incident. Okay, so we're going to break it up to 5 sections. First, I'm going to go through a little bit of a background of North Korea, what they've done, where have they gone to. I'm going to try and make it brief because that's not the key component here. Then we're going to get into the tools that were identified, trying to break down how they are connected and how they worked in order to facilitate this IT farm. Then we're going to go into a demonstration. I'm going to try and be as clear as possible. It does relates to some ARP packets, WebSockets, Wireshark, and TCP dumps, and all of that good stuff. Then we're going to go into the recommendations. There we're going to share a little more information around IOCs and what you can do or take back to your organization. And then lastly, with some thoughts on the entire investigation and incident. Okay, a little bit of background. So over the past decade, give or take, North Korea has risen to be proven to be one of the more sophisticated, patient threat actors out there, financially motivated threat actors. Obviously, there's the nation states that go in and maybe not hunt for financial gain, may hunt for data and intel. North Korea specifically has done a lot of things throughout the past decade that slowly increase the level of sophistication and the goals they're trying to achieve. If it starts with the famous Sony hack that caused disruption, not necessarily financial gain, to all the heists that conducted over the past few decades, including ransomware and crypto theft. And the tipping point, or the last stage that we're going to discuss today, the IT farm, or the IT worker. We're going to talk a little bit about what is the goal there with this particular case. Okay, so before we get into the timeline of when the first time we've heard of this IT operations from North Korea, it's important to note that this timeline is what the FBI released, is shared over the years. So in 2022, this is the first threat emergence, or the first initial threat that emerges. The FBI, including the Department of State and the Treasury, issued a statement together saying, beware, we are getting more and more familiar with North Korea trying to impersonate as your IT workers, gain work legitimately as an engineer, DevOps, or any kind of a sysadmin to try and infiltrate into your organization. Not a lot of more information was shared there other than this is a threat that you need to be aware of. Not much to do other than, okay, we're still hiring our people, we're still going through HR, background checks, let's move on. Then between August 2024 and February 2025, that's when the FBI said that in that period of time, they discovered at least 21 command and control centers or servers that impacted specific enterprises globally, not only in the US. And between September 2024 and February 2025, that is when the FBI released that at least 7 organizations in 6 countries were impacted or have an IT worker from North Korea that impersonated as a legitimate worker. Then in January 2025, this is the escalation component here earlier this year. This is when one of those IT workers actually started to extort the organization. So if up until that point, the goal of the operations of having an IT worker impersonate as a legitimate worker, collect salary, the goal there was to collect that salary and just wire it to North Korea. That is how they've collected money. In order to make it feasible and worth their time, they've created these IT farms that can be managed by an individual versus multiple people that impersonate. We're going to talk about that farm in a minute. But up until that point, that was the goal, just to collect the money through the paychecks and transfer into North Korea. In January 2025, the extortion through either sharing the data that they were managed to exfiltrate, either through sharing initial internal policies that the enterprise did not want to share out or expose. I'll say that some of the victims that were identified, one of those sevens, a few were in finance, some in healthcare, and there was one defense contractor. So there's a few, call it critical data there that might impose on this organization. And then unrelated to this particular IT farm, there is that Bybit incident that happened in February 2025. Again, a North Korean threat group that managed to wait patiently, expose a very critical part within Bybit's processes in order to hijack $1.5 billion. That's just another instance of the North Korean activities. Now that brings us to our case. And before I, again, go into the details here, it's important to note that this has been in the news over the past few months. You've heard of a lady in Minnesota that said that she did not know that she was basically helping North Korean IT workers. I think there was also a person, in Minnesota. There was one in Arizona as well. These people are just your average folks who are getting approached and asking them to let us just use your identity, use your address in order to get hired. You don't need to do anything. Just have a laptop, give us your ID, and we'll take it from here, and we'll give you a cut of the money. And they accepted it, not realizing they're helping North Korean threat actors. So, in one of those raids that you see here, one of our clients got a call from the FBI saying your endpoint, your machine was found in a farm that is controlled by North Korea. Our clients immediately contacted us saying, listen, the FBI called. They said that we've had North Korean threat actor in our environment, that we've gave this person a laptop, we gave them access, we gave them identity. So we have what we call an insider threat, right, in our environment, and we're not sure what to do next. So when they contacted us, the first thing that we've done is that we started investigating within the environment of our client. We still didn't have access to the laptop itself. So what we've done is we know the identity of the threat actor, we know their IP, we know their laptop. We went and did a threat hunt to see if there's any additional threats, any lateral movements, any privilege escalation, anything they need to be aware of or be concerned for. After that threat hunt was performed, we identified there was nothing conducted there. This was one of those pure, just trying to collect salaries and move that money out. So there was no real threat there. At some point, the FBI gave us access to the laptop itself, and we were able to examine it, pull the tools from the laptop, examine the scripts, understand how they managed to operate that laptop remotely, gain remote access to that laptop, and go undetected for months. That is when the case became significantly more interesting. From that laptop, we identified what we call a treasure trove of scripts and tools that they use in order to hide their activities. And we're going to go through some of those scripts on today's presentation. So first, what we have here is the scripts that enable control without malware installation. And it's very important to understand there's no malware. There's no specific executable that runs within the environment that gave access to the threat actor. This is a machine that operating using Zoom, using Python, using Zoom and ARP packets in order to maintain control and access to that laptop. So that's one, scripts. Second step is WebSockets communication. You will see that throughout our conversation today is how they manage to maintain and use WebSockets in order to control that laptop, and not just control that particular laptop, but also control additional laptops within that IT farm, on that local network of those IT farms. If you need to imagine it, there's multiple machines in a single room. You have one server that communicates through to the C2 out there in the cloud. And that individual computer can, in the internal network, communicate with those laptops and execute commands on those laptops undetected. The Zoom component itself we'll touch up on a little bit later in more detail. But here, this is not a vulnerability within Zoom. This is purely tools that exist within, as it's called, off-the-shelf, right? Think of it as Control-C, Control-V. They have control, I believe it's S, to start screen share, control whatever it is to start a meeting. So they utilize those functions in order to start and provide access to the Zoom, to remote control to that machine itself. And then lastly, in the evasion operates below the traditional logging threshold just because all the activities conducted were within working hours. They did actual mouse movements, keystrokes. They used normal tools within the environment. Like I said, WebSockets and ARP communication in order to hide their activities. If, we'll call it, it's a big if, they had any sorts of network detection on that machine or ability to detect ARP communication or respect those, maybe they would have detected it, but we'll show how come that wasn't the case here. Okay, so now that we talked about the background and we understand a little bit about the broader campaign activity, I want to get a little closer into the tooling themselves, and we'll start with, oh, sorry, did I go backwards? We'll start with the user presence beacon script. So when you think about it, this one here is how they start with the C2 communications. So in this particular case, the script will gather system information in order to share with the attacker's C2, and this is a specific script with the C2. And this particular model detects when the user is active during working hours or logged in, and then beacons that to our C2 server, to the attacker's C2 server. Okay, basically this is the green light that tells the operator of the C2 farm or to the controller on the C2, says this machine is now operational and active, and it's ready for you to run additional commands on. It allows the attacker to understand and time when to remote control into the machine itself, when to use the Zoom and ARP packets components. And it allows it to blend with normal working hours because it's not always on, the machine is not always operating. We don't want them to work with outside of working hours. They want to hide their activities throughout that. We'll go a little bit deeper into that again when we go into the demo. Then we go into the command rebroadcast relay script. Here it's a little, we'll call it a little more sophisticated. What we have here is we start with the WebSocket command that's coming from the C2 server. From there, we extract the command payload that comes from the C2, and then we're broadcasting it through our packets. Our packets, if someone not familiar with it, it's a network layer that kind of can broadcast on an internal local network to communicate IPs and MAC addresses but the ARP packet specifically is 64 byte, but normally it only uses 28, so there's a room for attackers to just append or add into that packet. And if you have the proper scripts, which they had here, you can add decrypted or encrypted content at the end of those ARP packets, and then get them decrypted on the other end with the victim machine or with the C2 server. And again, we'll demonstrate that. Once those ARP packets were broadcasted, the specific machine that we're trying to utilize extracts that command, the payload from the ARP packets, and then is able to execute them. So the broadcasting relay script here specifically just listens to the WebSocket messages from the attacker's C2, extracts the command from that WebSocket, and then broadcasts it in an ARP packet to the other system listening within that network. Couple of things to notice here. A, you'll see that they're using the interface is none. This is within their own script. We believe that this specific script was supposed to be EN0 because it was for a Mac. So one change that we've made for our demo that we're going to see. And then you'll notice also the destination and hardware destination there from an IP and from a MAC address is all zeros. This is one of the ARP packets protocols. That means they're broadcasting it to the entire network. The way that the machine knows which ARP packets is supposed to interpret is that there is a specific ID for each ARP packets that they're added to let which machine to know which command goes to them versus other machines within that network. Okay, on the input simulation agent script, here again we have listening to commands and using those commands, they're trying to decode them. And then for each decode command, we can inject the input and validate the channel ID. So in this script specifically, there is a dictionary that ties to the script. So we don't have to type an entire message. You can type specific words, and then the script knows to interpret specific commands. And then for each command that the input simulation agent is collecting, they're able to interpret the command itself, but also if it's tied to that specific channel ID. And then make sure it's within the rate limiting set. We'll see the rate limiting components that associated with the scripts. It's almost like a defense mechanism that was inputted in those scripts to make sure that you're only sending the right commands to the right machines. And we'll see that also in the demo as well. Okay, and then the last model we're going to talk about here, it's the Zoom. Okay, so here it's the component that's to receive specific commands from the WebSocket, specifically open, create, admit, and hide through WebSockets. And then the scripts themselves within the machine are able to open Zoom. They're able to create a new meeting ID and admit or accept requests. They're coming for remote control, and then hide the screen when needed. So again, we'll show that throughout the demonstration. Those are built in within the script itself. Another component that's important here is that when we launch Zoom sessions, we use that using Apple scripting or the Zoom's protocol handler. And again, it's important to note, this is not like a vulnerability within Zoom. This was just a function within the application itself. In the demo, we've used the version 6.2.6, 6.2.6, but since then they've modified it and it's no longer working. So because we've communicated with them, with Zoom over this specific concern, they've done some changes, and now you can no longer do those particular activities or using this script on the latest version of Zoom. And then perform screenshots. So you will notice, or if you've used Zoom, when someone requests control over your machine, you have to accept it. One of the scripts, which was actually one of the cooler concepts here, is they take screenshots of the machine using the WebSocket command, admit. they're taking a screenshot of the machine, of the screen itself, identifying through RGB filtering where the button is, and then moving the mouse there in order to click on admit. There's no button or there's no enter that just automatically allows us to admit the remote control. They have to do it through their mouse click. And that particular component was very interesting and allowed them to basically get in control without getting any interaction on the user end. So from the WebSockets, we're able to open a Zoom, start a meeting, ask for a remote access, and then admit ourselves in, and then hide the screen if we need to. And that's the approval of the remote control request, like I said, without any user interaction, using that script and the RGB filtering. Okay, the last model we're going to talk about is the network listener. This is a passive listener that captures ARP packets and forwards the data back to the attacker. Think about it. The C2 server wants to communicate. They're going through the WebSockets, and then there is a script that interprets the commands and pushes them as an ARP request. Those ARP broadcasting components are then interpreted by the machine. The machine executes the commands based on what they've collected from the ARP packet. And then if there's any content or any communication that requires to go from the victim back to the C2 server, that is what the machine does. It basically collects the information and sends it over, encrypted again through ARP packets. The script also captures covert triggers that send over ARP with a few small tweaks. And then it uses specifically the Python library Scapy to listen for ARP requests, extract the source MAC address, which is used as a covert payload container, and it does not respond to packets. This is a stealthy and very hard script that's very hard to detect. So the whole process is listen to ARP requests, extract encoded data, forward to C2 server, and then sleep before reconnection, again, for stealthy behavior. This is the script itself, and I believe that tomorrow all this information will be available on the website, so you can actually look at the screenshots themselves. But also we have a very detailed white paper around this that includes IOCs and detection rules and a lot of information. Will really help if you're looking to do that. But again, there's very specific components that I believe are, call it pragmatic. I'm not gonna, at the end of this, you may wanna go and start listening to ARP packets. That's likely not gonna be possible because of budget restrictions. But there's other ways to avoid this. Okay, so moving to demonstration. I think I'm on time. I'll try not to rush this component. So the first step in the demonstration, we'll go through 3 steps. One will be Zoom. We'll show you how the script actually opens Zoom, start a meeting, accepts the remote connection, and allows the C2 user, the operator, to manipulate the victim machine. The second component will be the ARP packets injection. Those are we'll call it the more sophisticated ones. They're very interesting on how they utilize a pre-existing protocol to do something that was just not intended for, just to hide all of their activities. And then last is a less, we'll call it authentic. This is a Signia Lab recreation because we only gained access to the laptop. So we have the access of the endpoint and what was happening in the lab, in the farm itself. We don't have any of the scripts on the C2. So we had to create our own C2 with our own scripts to see how we communicate. We've done that to verify and to actually see what type of detection, what type of alerts we may want to see or investigate within our client's environment. So that's the last demonstration to show the whole cycle of this. Okay, so what we see here are 3 screens. Top right in the red, that is our C2 server, our own created code to interact with the models themselves. In green is the host itself. On the right, this is an SSH session to the Mac, to the machine, to see what script is running. And again, in this one, we've used Zoom 6.2.6. Here we're seeing basically how everything was commanded through the WebSockets. So what you'll see here, basically, and the demo hasn't started yet. Like I said, the bottom right is the SSH, just so you see what we're doing. The left is what's happening on the screen of the machine, the victim, and the top right, that's the C2. Here we're just starting the connection itself and verifying the connection. And then you will see the Zoom running, and you'll see some of the commands, including open, and then the respond at the bottom. That's the victim machine. Okay. Okay, so we started the connection. Now we're asking Zoom to open. Now the Zoom is open, we're asking it to hide, and then we can bring it back into the forefront. This is focus. That's a command within the WebSocket. Now, after we know that the machine is running, we're going to ask for it to create a meeting. So it creates a meeting. Start a meeting. And again, in our C2 center, the top right, after we have a meeting, we're going to just join it from a different machine. So we have the ID and we can just connect. In this particular model, what you'll see is that one of the scripts failed in terms of collecting the meeting ID. That's a key component within the script in order to allow a different user to join the meeting. That includes the meeting ID and the password. So once you join, at the top right corner, you will see the request to gain access. So take a second. So now someone joined the Zoom meeting. And you'll see at the top right, we're going to approve because we requested access to the machine, and now they approved the access, and we can start typing and controlling the entire machine there. Okay, so that was Zoom. The second demo here, we're going to show how the ARP HID, the HID, would utilize here. So again, we'll have here at the actually the bottom right now, you'll see the C2 in green. In yellow, that is a Ubuntu VM connected to our C2 server to receive commands and then send them via an ARP packet. So again, think about the farm itself. You'll have the victim machines, and then you have a single machine within that internal network that's connected to the C2 server that allows them to send the ARP packets, right? So every machine in that farm can act as that interpreter, right? But everyone is communicating within that internal network through ARP packets. The WebSocket is purely for the C2 server. So the yellow is the Ubuntu VM connected to our C2 server to receive the command and then send them via ARP packets. And then in red, that is the victim that's listening to ARP packets and to do the hit injection on the victim host. So the C2 server is on the left. That's in the purple component. In red, what you see is we're going to type a few times. In some cases, there's a rate limiting component, so we'll see a no response when we send a component. This is another defense mechanism that they put in to make sure there's no multiple commands or you're not going to alert or trigger any concerns because they're trying to put certain limits on the amount of commands you're sending to each machine. So you see us typing commands twice every once in a while. That's one component. And then on the right, that is the two Ubuntu VMs. The top is running TCP dump, filtering specifically for ARP packets. We want to show you the info that's leaving the Ubuntu VM. And then on the bottom window, that is us running the model that's connected to our C2 that takes the command and breaks it up via the ARP packets. So you'll see yeah, okay. Okay, and then on the Windows level, right, this is where we're going to see at the top, I believe everyone's familiar, this is Wireshark that's filtering for ARP packets. We want to see on the host, on the victim itself, what type of packets are coming in, entry into Wireshark, and then how the Windows machine is interpreting basically those packets and executing the commands that we're joining in. Our goal here in the entire demo is just to type the word hello in the Windows host, and we're going to use it via our C2 and our packets. Okay, so at the C2 level, we're connected, and we're going to start, and you'll see it again, the TC dump is on the top right, and Wireshark is on the left. We're just starting all the processes so we can see what we're doing. So at the C2, at the bottom right, we're going to see key H. We're trying to type the letter H. That doesn't work on the first one, so we're going to do it again. And then you'll see the ARP packet sent from the TC dump, the top right, and received on the left in the Wireshark, and interpreted by the machine itself to start typing in Notepad so we can control it. Now, you'll see that we're doing letter by letter, controlling the Windows machine. That is a very extensive process. I mean, you can't expect the operator on the C2 level to start typing every letter and slowly working it. We believe, and there's an assumption here, that they have significantly more modules or scripts on their end that they can run specific commands or movements within the C2 that they will then translate and communicate it to those victim machines. But this is just, again, pure demo on how from the C2 server through our packets, communicated to the Windows machine, interpreted, taking those specific added bytes, collecting all the information required, and then printing it on the machine itself. And so up until now, there was barely any modification to the script, right? This was purely C2 to those machines based on the information we collect from the laptop. Now this is where we're taking a step forward. This is where we're added our own intelligence, our own knowledge, and using our own C2 in order to create something that will be a little more, we'll call it exciting, something that may be the next step, right? What we're seeing here is an IT farm. All they're trying to do is just communicate with those laptops. They're trying to move the mouse, do some actions on the machine, right? Being able to operate as if they're an actual IT worker. The next logical step, if they want to do something more nefarious, is to start doing command execution, privilege escalation, move laterally, start using this ARP packets communication, right? They're communicating completely undetected in this network. How they can utilize that when they're trying to escalate within your network, right? They gain access to a machine. They're able to download and execute all sorts of ARP, all these scripts, and basically dump them and use them in order to run different machines within the organization completely undetected, because using ARP that I don't think any organization or enterprise, maybe in the defense side, maybe government, they use some sort of network detection that looks at the ARP level, but likely that no one is using that. So it's a very undetectable technique to use. So if we take that knowledge and trying to do a full remote code execution, this is how it's going to look like. So, so in the red at the top, that's, again, our C2 server. And then on the green, that is the Ubuntu VM that's connected to the C2. That one will propagate commands via ARP packets to the victim host. And then in the yellow, that's the victim. Will receive the command and send it back via ARP, the ARP packets. So again, think about it. Again, C2 to a server, from a server to an internal network via ARP to the victim. The victim will execute something on their machine, and then through ARP communication, through ARP packets, we'll send the data to the server on the internal machine, and then through the WebSockets, we'll send back the C2 server. You'll see that we're going to use exec logic. This is something that we've used on our own C2, just to create a little easier manipulation and execution of commands. And then we'll call it the most important component to pay attention to is when we're running through the commands. So we'll obviously, as I said, our packets are 64 bits. Normal usage of our packets are roughly on average 28 bytes. Sorry, bytes, 28 bytes. So we have space to append data, but very limited amount of space to append that data. So we have to not only send it via ARP, but we have to break it up, send it bit by bit, and then collect it, assemble it, and then send it back. That took some time, but we were able to do that. Again, just using the scripts that they've created and tweaking it a little bit so it breaks apart the communication and send it back to us so we can manipulate everything through ARP and nothing more. So again, the bottom left, it's the Ubuntu VM that receives the commands to broadcast, and then on the right, that will be the victim. At the top, that will be TC dump to allow us to understand what's happening on the network side with our packets. And again, you will see here that we're just using the entire length of the ARP packets on the top right, that's 64 bits, just trying to, again, break apart each data point that we're trying to send into 64 bytes. And that's the demo itself. So again, at the top, that's the C2. Bottom left is our Ubuntu, and the right is the victim. And we're connected, and we're gonna execute who am I. So you'll see that the Ubuntu is sending it via ARP, received on the victim machine, and send it back to the Ubuntu. So we're getting the answer. And now we're trying to obviously get the user list. And you see that the packets, again, it just breaks apart every information that we need into the length that's required, appending them to the ARP, and sending it back to us, all goes undetected. In a way, that will be an interesting way to exfiltrate data, if required, on other investigations or other, we'll call it, attacks they may want to execute. Okay, we have 8 minutes. I'll try and go through this quickly. So I said it before, ARP broadcasting or to start detecting anomalous ARP components might be too challenging for regular enterprises, even the larger businesses out there, just because of the amount of cost and effort and just labor that requires in order to monitor something that likely is not going to move the needle too much. But that's definitely something you can look into. Another component is MAC addresses oddities. That is something that definitely can be observed. You notice that in the ARP packets, they use broadcasting and they use MAC addresses that are zeros to allow them to communicate broadly within the internal network to broadcast, abuse the broadcasting capabilities of the ARP protocol. In a sense, what we're going to go through here in entire recommendations is understanding the protocols and understanding what's outside of the protocol. What is something that the protocol should not be supporting, or it's not what it was intended to do. So if you see some unusual or spoofed source MAC addresses, obviously that is a good indicator of what's happening in this particular investigation. If you have to take one piece out of this is WebSocket traffic. We see more and more an increased significant of usage of WebSockets for the persistency. It is fairly undetected, even though it is easy to detect. If you already have monitoring some sort of the level of the application layer and you're monitoring HTTP, the WebSocket component is not a huge lift and will require significant understanding of abnormalities within your network, specifically when it comes to HTTP. The last one is on the Zoom component. That one is an interesting, it's already been patched, but again, it goes around the protocol component. If there's any application that you use within the environment that you can collect logs, even basic logs that are required, that understands how an application should be used. Does a user need to start Zoom every morning at 9 a.m. and shut it down at 5? Does a user constantly uses the remote access approval? There's certain elements that are logged within a lot of your applications that can be good indicators of if someone is misusing them or using them for an attack. What we gave a lot of credit to North Korean here is their ability to understand that you don't have to operate just from identity and machines. There's a lot of human in between around protocols, and they can abuse that, right? Expecting the unexpected in the way of how applications and protocols are used within your environment will be immensely useful, not just to look at this particular incident, but try and expand it to others. And then last thoughts here before I take some questions is to understand the flow of the attack, right? So the attackers exploited the workflow vulnerabilities. And what does that mean? They understood that once they're hired, they can start operating as an insider threat. They can do certain activities if go undetected, like on the ARP packets component. No one will actually ping them or verify their existence. That includes the trust boundaries here, right? Because you have you've hired an individual that went through an interview process. That is a good way to go and check with your HR folks there, right? Your people, on how they hiring people, how they identify and verify their identity, either through, even if it's remote work, have you seen them in person once? Have you seen the same person twice on the Zoom call? True story, unrelated to that, we've had an interview with the same person, the same name. The first phase, one person showed up. The second phase, a different person showed up, right? And the same name was oh, no, I'm the same person coming to the interview. Luckily, we shared notes very extensively and the Zoom recording with the other interviewer in the process. So immediately they knew that something was off. But I can guarantee that's not the case for other companies. You know, they go through the first interview, they go to the next. No one knows, especially when remote workers, no one knows how that person looks or how that interview went other than the professional components of it. So understanding the trust between the different functions around your enterprise. Evolving detection, I touched on that. I'm not expecting anyone to start collecting or detecting ARP packets abused, but understanding that the detection methods that we're using right now are known to the attackers. They understand what we're hunting for. They understand that we're looking for suspicious connections and data movement and privilege escalation and password changes, and they understand what we're looking for in terms of detection. So they will hunt and look for activities that are not normally are on our radar to be detected as a security incident. So understanding that you must think like an attacker and try and figure out what they will do if they manage to get into your environment next will help you tremendously in understanding what is the next layer or the next level of detection is. And then I talked about the protocol. Protocol thinking is key. Trying to start detecting all the payloads that exist out there because there's new payloads coming in every second with new malicious content will be challenging to keep up with. Try and think about the protocol itself and the behavior that you expect that protocol, that application to have, and start detecting those. I think that's it, all I have for today. We have about a minute and a half for questions. Any questions? Yes?
Yeah, just a quick question. So what was the job role for the person whose identity was compromised?
That was a DevOps engineer. Yes?
Did they do any job?
So interesting. Through the FBI investigation, because we were just one of many, they shared with us that it varies. Some people, some organizations said that the IT worker was one of the best ones. They actually did the work because they understand, but some said that they barely heard from that person, right? That was just working there for a couple of months, 3 months, and they did the bare minimum. Yeah?
Do you have a sense of how they do the onboarding of the laptops?
So our client, they did the, so if we're talking about the onboarding of call it the facilitator, right? The people in the US that sold their identity basically, that we don't know. That's, I think, still pending an FBI investigation. I think a few of them already facing trial, but we don't have real knowledge of that. On our client side, we know that they've failed on the onboarding component. They ran into a severe shortage in DevOps individuals, and they ran through quick hiring, and they did not check all the boxes around the background checks, and they basically skipped and got compromised. I think we're out of time. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. Appreciate your time.